Happy New Year, folks. Welcome to another year-end video of mine, as I rank the games I've played this year from worst to best. And surprisingly, I've made good on my effort to review more videos this year. If I keep this up and set my mind to it, I can almost make one video per month next year. Anyway, just a heads up before I get started, these are the games that I've played this year, but not necessarily the games that were all released this year. And as usual, if you don't see a game that you liked on this list, it's more than likely that I just haven't played it. So without further ado, let's get started with the worst game I have played this year. I am so disappointed that this had to be the worst. I was really looking forward to playing this game as it appeared to be a BioShock-inspired Orwellian adventure. Unfortunately, what I got was a repetitive, drawn-out, and overall underwhelming experience. What's even more disappointing is that there were clearly so many great ideas here. I loved the premise, the joy pills were clever, and there was so much room for some incredible plot points. Alas, these ideas just never came to fruition in practice. On top of all of this, the level up system broke any challenge the game had, there were constant glitches, and the addition of 3 separate characters just made the game redundant as you had to level up and unlock fast travel points all over again. Add on an unfortunately underwhelming story, and some seriously underdeveloped characters, and you have the supremely disappointing We Happy Few. Thankfully, unlike a few years ago, my worst wasn't a complete broken piece of garbage, so that's nice. Well, I'm afraid we have come to the end of our time for this portion. Zingo. Up next, let's take a look at a game that I actually regretted putting off for so long. You know, the sheer fact that this game is so low on the list is actually a testament to the quality of games I've played this year. I put off playing this game for so long because I was really skeptical that Sonic Team could capture the greatness of Sonic Mania, which was released earlier in 2018. Well, it turns out I was right, but what I was amazed by was Sonic Team actually making a solid 3D platformer. As far as I'm concerned, this is Sonic's best 3D platformer since Sonic Generations. Not saying much, I know, but hear me out. This game takes the simple premise of platforming level to level with branching paths, various collectibles, and cosmetic rewards while rolling around at the speed of sound, and it just works. The designs of these stages are gorgeous and the platforming is smooth and responsive. Not to mention, insert DeviantArt joke here, which, despite the memery, you can make some really cool creations here. I guess the other reason this game is ranked so low is because, despite some decent replay value, you can realistically finish this game in one sitting, and truth be told, it lacks quite a bit of challenge. So despite what the majority of critics seem to think, I feel that if Sonic Team continues in this vein, then they may bring back life to the Sonic series. Again. And now, let's take a trip to the Caribbean. Now, if there's one thing I like, it's city-building games. If there's another thing I like, it's being a dictator on a tropical island. Thankfully, Tropico lets me do both. Tropico VI took this premise, polished it up a bit, added a few more bells and whistles, and gave me a very enjoyable experience. Now granted, it's not all that different from Tropico V. In fact, some of the win conditions are identical. But hey, I'm positive on this channel. Usually. The addition of multiple islands greatly adds to the challenge and possibilities for expansion. The new building options give you a massive variety in how you wish to set up your Banana Republic, and they've even fixed many of the issues with the AI from previous installments. From conning tourists, to playing politics, to exploiting your citizens, the Tropico series always manages to create a wacky, memorable, and overall fun experience. Viva Tropico, viva el presidente. So, feeling optimistic about the next game? I wouldn't. Pathologic was one of the most brilliantly written and incredibly atmospheric video games that I've ever played. Unfortunately, it only had a cult following, and was very rough around the edges. Add in localization issues, and you'd be entirely forgiven for not hearing about this game. Well, Pathologic II reimagines this game and greatly smooths out many of the issues from the original. As you take on the role of 3 possible characters, all of whom have interlinking fates, you must survive this plague-infested village for 12 days, all while having to juggle your own personal needs. This game creates a truly living and breathing town with many named NPCs and a clear hierarchical society. Anyone can die, and you must do your damnedest to save as many as you can, while desperately scrambling to create a cure and fighting for your own survival. Sometimes literally. Honestly, I can't say enough kind things about this game from a storytelling and atmospheric standpoint. Unfortunately, I cannot say this for the graphics and gameplay. But despite some flaws, I was enthralled by this brutal, unforgiving, beautiful, and incredibly deep story of survival. Okie dokie folks, let's take a look at what happens when indie devs make a sequel that's better than the original. You know, I really appreciate Ukulele for 2 reasons. First, it lets us old-timers reminisce about the platformers of our youth, and second, it introduces a new generation of gamers to the rare style of vine-swinging, barrel blasting, and item collecting. Ukulele and the Impossible Lair wonderfully captures the style, challenge, and just overall spirit of the old DKC titles. In fact, this is easily one of the best platformers that I've played in years. With a fluid and clever overworld, gorgeous and greatly designed levels, and an incredible amount of challenge with the Impossible Lair itself. The soundtrack is amazing, the graphics are just delightful, and incredibly, the Impossible Lair isn't impossible. I want my money back, quite frankly. But in the end, I'm very happy that I played this bright, colorful, and overall delightful video game. Y'all ready to get sad? Me neither. Once upon a time, in a wild, wild world, there were 2 wolf brothers. So, for 3 years now, some version of Life is Strange has made my list. Unfortunately, this year it's much lower. Let's get my negatives of this season out of the way early. While this game is by no means bad, I just felt that it didn't quite live up to the drama and tension of the original. This is unfortunately compounded by the fact that I felt the pacing was very poor. There were far too many times during the episodes when I was just wishing for the game to move the plot forward, which should never be the case in a series as deep and reflective as this. All of that being said, Life is Strange 2 does tell an incredibly deep and heartfelt story. Every character that the 2 brothers meet on their journey is memorable in one way or another, and there are some incredibly difficult decisions that the player must make. Amazingly, there were a few times while playing that I had to make a very difficult decision, and in the end I chose possibly the greater of 2 evils. Not because I would take this action personally, or even just because I wanted to see what would happen, but because I knew it was the most efficient way for Sean to help his brother. This type of engagement, along with great character development from the protagonists and some incredibly heart-wrenching moments, make for one extremely memorable experience. Life is strange, isn't it? Moving right along, let's look at what was my least viewed review of 2019. This game is fantastic. I loved Sunless Skies and was extremely excited to see what Failbetter Studios would do with Sunless Skies. Well, what they did was take the roguelike gameplay terror elements, extremely rich lore and storytelling, and fascinating creatures, and expanded upon all of them. Every single island in this game not only has its own story to tell, but they all have a personality of their own. The addition of 4 entire separate areas to explore greatly increases the scope of this adventure. The individual characters that you meet and even take on board as your crew are extremely memorable. The backgrounds and environments are wonderfully designed, and the soundtrack is downright beautiful. Alright, I'm gonna stop gushing now before I run out of adjectives. But if you have any interest in Lovecraftian storytelling, or challenging and deep roguelikes, then I cannot recommend this game enough. Chances are I'll be playing this game for a long, long time. So until I finish all endings, it's 3rd star on the right, and straight on till morning. Alright, back to Earth. So one of the major strengths of the Metro series was just how deep and grand of stories it could tell with a mostly small world. Aside from a few instances when you would travel to the surface, the majority of these tales would take place in the Moscow metro system after a nuclear apocalypse. Metro Exodus, however, takes the series to the surface in a grand and massive tale of finding a new home. And it does so with no trouble whatsoever. It is rare that I am genuinely surprised at how long it takes me to finish a game. However, there were at least 3 times while playing when I thought it was about to start winding down because I genuinely didn't think the game would continue. I was wrong on all counts. Metro Exodus is not a game, it is an epic. From the irradiated metros to what's left of the Caspian Sea to beautiful forests, this game kept my attention from start to finish. Add on brand new gameplay elements such as modifying weapons and using the new environments in your favor during combat, and you have an extremely solid video game. A game that made me contemplate its story for long after. Force answers force. War breeds war, and death only brings death. To break this vicious circle, one must do more than just act without any thought or doubt. What you up to, goofball? You know, I'm gonna say it. This is the best season of Telltale's Walking Dead since the first. This finale follows Clementine, AJ, and their new friends in yet another desperate tale of survival. The season shows some incredibly shocking moments, along with jaw-dropping plot twists. The new characters introduced are incredibly dynamic, the gameplay is much more intricate, and I can honestly say that at no point was I ever bored. I pointed this out last year, but as opposed to the rest of the series, there are no characters that are entirely insufferable. Even when someone was being difficult or downright foolish, I could at least see where they were coming from. Except for you, James, you are incredibly ignorant and I hope your friends eat you. This season really showed not only how many difficult decisions needed to be made in such a horrible situation, but it also showcased the effects your actions have on others, especially those who look up to you. So with the end of Telltale Games, I can gladly say that The Walking Dead came to a magnificent conclusion. So long, Lee. Thanks for everything. The eyes of the world are upon you. So I've decided to stick all of the Medal of Honor games I've played this year in this spot, because if I separated them, we'd be here all day. But I was absolutely amazed by not only how well these games have held up over time, but just how incredibly fun they were. Many times on this channel, I've gone back and played a game from my childhood, only to discover that it really hadn't held up. Thankfully, this was not the case for Medal of Honor. European Assault was very tough, but had an extremely clever objective system. Airborne was a very solid shooter overall, and the parachuting into each battle created a unique playthrough almost every time. Rising Sun, while not so great on a technical level, was so hilariously over the top that I couldn't help but enjoy myself, and Frontline showed a grand and incredibly epic journey across World War II. Then there was Pacific Assault, which I had never even played before, but it was so well put together, it may very well be one of the best Medal of Honor games that I've played. All of these games take me back to my childhood and remind me of how great some of the games I used to play really are. And now that I'm older, I can appreciate them on a whole new level. From Guadalcanal to Tunisia. From Sicily to Arnhem. The Medal of Honor games were the shooters of my childhood. Alright folks, just 2 left. And as my friend Penultimo once said, whoops, nope, already did Tropico. Sorry, Penultimo. This is one of the most fun games I have ever played in my life. A colony management game that has you take your band of adorable duplicants and attempt to survive inside of an asteroid. There are some hilarious situations in which you can find yourself, such as flooding your base in polluted water due to not having enough latrines, or creating literal death pits once you discover that carbon dioxide is heavier than oxygen. The gameplay is fantastic as well. This is one of those games that can make you feel like a genius once you understand how many different ways there are to solve any type of problem. From creating electricity out of hydrogen, to filtering polluted water back to the duplicants, and even creating a smokestack to the vacuum of space to be rid of excess carbon dioxide. The sheer variety in asteroids you can explore is incredible, which makes for a ton of replay value. And to top it all off, the animation in this game is just adorable. I would highly recommend this game to anyone, and with the sheer amount of elements still being added, I can see myself playing this game for a long time. Just remember, oxygen is not included, even though it is. Alright folks, now for the best game I have played in 2019. You know, even I'm a bit surprised that this ended up at number 1, but as I thought it over, Sekiro had to be the best. Here it is simply. This game is incredibly difficult. Even after playing Dark Souls, I was not at all prepared for this challenge, as I had to break months of muscle memory from those titles. On top of that, the precision and timing required to pull off attacks and deflections, along with boss fights that can challenge any swordsman, this is one tough game. But here's the thing. At no point did I ever consider giving up. The enemy designs are not only varied and spectacular, but they evolve as the game progresses. The mini-boss battles encourage tactical planning, as you can sneak a free death blow on most of them, and the main bosses are an absolute blast. The NPCs are greatly fleshed out and characterized, even the ones that only have a few lines of dialogue. The environments are marvelous with a full interconnecting world, and this game, quite frankly, has one of the greatest final battles that I've ever seen. All of this combined with some extremely rich lore, and you have the best game that I have played in 2019. Happy New Year, folks, and here's to another year of eDog reviews. Now, will I make a favorite of the decade list? I'll think about it.